1/3 of job seekers took a pay cut for better work-life balance. Here's an interesting article from CNBC that talks about some of the dynamics that are going on in the job market right now. And in reading the article, I actually felt like it highlighted some of the important things that, as people that, as professionals that work in jobs and in marketing, I think we see a lot of the mismanagement of careers, and then also some of the misaligned incentives, and also, to be frank, some of the delusion around what's going on right now, triggered a lot by what people are seeing and hearing in the media, and from maybe their friend circles and things around what it really means to change jobs right now and what that does for a long-term horizon when you look at the career. So a couple stats just to get us going. So the article mentions that 20% of workers surveyed indicated that they would take a 10% pay cut to work fewer hours or to work for themselves. So that's, let's put a pin in that stat for now, because it triggers a lot of thoughts around entrepreneurship and just how feasible that is. So we'll put a pin in that for now. The second stat is that 56% of respondents said they would trade higher pay for a company that gave them long-term stability. So we'll start there. The first of three talking points that I wanted to bring up with this article is that one. And there's been so much turmoil and so much turnover and so much churn in the job markets over the last 2 years. And for those individuals who have used the time to, if they've been fortunate enough to say, okay, I can now go get a job at my dream company, or I can go make a little bit more money, work a little more, but it's at a place where I can see myself working for 10, 15, 20 years. It's been a great time to do that. My fear, and it's really from anecdotal evidence that we're seeing, and in conversations that I've had with hiring managers and other experts in the job market, that's not really what's triggering, or that's really not the kind of movement that we're seeing over the last 2 years. We're seeing a lot of people chase a little bit more money, and the downside of that kind of a chase is that while it looked like a great idea 12 months ago, 14, 16 months ago to chase 10% more in salary, 50% more in salary, what we're seeing with rising gas prices and companies having to downshift on their gearbox, so to speak, in terms of what they're doing, and then throw in the conflict in Ukraine as well, is that companies are starting to see that their growth trajectories aren't as strong. And when you have that kind of a scenario, what's the first thing that you have to do when you've got to cut costs? Is typically you lay off the people that joined the company most recently, in that there might be a last in first out sort of dynamic going on, because a lot of the hiring that's happened over the last 24 months has been catalyzed by what people are thinking are incredibly steep growth trajectories that happened when the economy was flooded with money. The rates were at zero for the most part, and so people could really supercharge their growth by bringing on human capital. And so what's the dynamic around that when you're starting to see the markets pull back very drastically, and there's geopolitical conflict and frictions around the world? And what does that mean for the business landscape? I think you start to see that a lot of people that chased a little bit more money over the last 14 months or so should start to maybe sweat a little bit in their socks and feel like, okay, well, if I'm not, haven't learned the job to where I'm really adding value to the company, I think it'd be a scary time, or at least a little bit unnerving. So, on the flip side, to look more positively at that stat again, the idea that more than half of the individuals would take a pay cut to go to a company that gave them stability, or they viewed as a little bit more favorable in terms of what they want to do for the long term. I think that's a good idea, as long as you're weighing the pros and cons of doing that in this kind of a market. The second point is tied back to just the idea that people were willing to take less money in this day and age. I think a career is a long time, no, absolutely, and the compounding effect means that you can start slow and pick it up and make up a lot of lost time. But careers are long, but they're also not that long, and that you can't really make up for a lot of lost time and a lot of lost salary. So the idea that people are willing to take less money because it gives them work-life balance, well, life is just getting more and more expensive. We're seeing that with gas prices. We're seeing that with the price of really anything at the moment, that things are getting more expensive. So the idea that people can still live, over the next few years at a lower cost basis, I think is interesting. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it's an interesting dynamic. And then, of course, younger people probably feel like, okay, yeah, I can do that. But everybody ages, and everybody's, costs go up as they get a little bit older. I feel like, people pick up families and houses and mortgages and cars and just different things that happen over the course of a lifetime that costs money. And those things are costing more and more money. So the idea that you can give up salary now, forego some of that compounded benefit, I think is an interesting idea. It's a dangerous one, I think, over the long term. Because like I said, a career is long, but it's not so long that you can make up for lost time, a lot of lost time at least. And then finally, the third one, and I think this is an interesting one too, which is triggered by that first stat, and I'll repeat it one more time, which is that 20% of workers surveyed indicated that they would take a 10% pay cut to work for themselves or to have better hours. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear that stat is that if you really wanted to work for yourself, I think the idea that you're only willing to take a 10% pay cut for that option is a little bit unrealistic. The gig economy is been in the news a lot, of course, and but most of the richest aggregate to a small percentage at the top of that food chain. Businesses take a long time to build. As somebody who works in growth strategies, we work with companies that every day is tricky when it comes to trying to trigger growth. And so the idea that somebody is who's, for just take rough numbers, who's making $50,000 a year is willing to take a $5,000 haircut for the option to work for themselves, I think is very unrealistic when you really think about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, to run your own business, to do your own thing, to own your own schedule. It looks probably more like a hockey stick if you're lucky, but it looks like just a flat line if you're maybe the aggregate, because most businesses fail when they're run, small businesses at least. So just that stat kind of triggered that thought for me in terms of something that seemed a little bit delusional. And then the other one is 20% of workers are willing to take a 10% pay cut to have better hours. Salaries, at the end of the day, when you talk to business owners, hiring managers, people that are in charge of salary structures, salaries are a function of value add for the most part. And so the idea that 20% of workers would like to work fewer hours and take a little bit of a pay cut, I think it's one of those delusions in the job market that's triggered a lot by the work-life balance messaging, a lot of the anti-work messaging. It's rare. It's difficult to find an employer that's willing to pay you nearly the same salary to work less. And so tied to that entrepreneurial stat, I think it's just a tricky place to think that people can take such a small haircut to have such flexibility or do the things that they want to do, work less, own their own businesses, do their own thing. The haircuts that people are going to have to take, I think, to activate those kind of options are just not that cheap. And so, but the article is interesting. I'd recommend you take a look at it if you haven't. It's called "1/3 of Job Switchers Took a Pay Cut for a Better Work-Life Balance: How to Prepare to Live on a Lower Salary." It's in CNBC, and the two standout stats there we've discussed, and some of the talking points around whether it's been a good time to change jobs over the last 24 months. The most just to kind of go back to the original point, it probably has been for a lot of people. I heard recently from a business owner that there's a realization at the hiring level or at the management level that most people can go and chase and grab X percentage more dollars at the moment. I think the labor market is so skewed in favor of the candidate right now, that's probably the case. But over the long term, is that a good idea when, there are so many different dynamics that go into your success over the course of a career? And then for the individuals who aren't chasing more money or chasing stability at a company, who are actually looking to take a pay cut or who work fewer hours, the idea that you can do that at such a low cost, that only a 10% pay cut, which is the stat, it's just a little bit unreasonable in my point of view. I'd be very curious to know what you guys think in the comment section below. And hopefully if you've enjoyed this video, and you can subscribe to the channel and stay tuned to what we have to say next.